Welcome to the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast, and I'm your host, Dwayne Kerrigan. With 35 years in business and close to 30 ventures across 12 industries, I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. I'm trying to piece together the years. So did you have the scoliosis surgery before the accident, the ski accident, or post?
Before.
Oh, before? Oh, wow. Really? Oh my gosh. Did that affect your skiing?
Well, it did. I basically had to relearn how to ski moguls. And, the doctors and my parents and coaches told me that I should find a new sport, or actually the surgeon said I should find a new hobby. And I think that was that's what led me to, sort of a rebellious stance, just because, how dare you call that my hobby? This is my calling,
Right. I suspect based on, what I've known of you or seen and seeing you speak, I can imagine that went over like a lead balloon. So we should probably introduce you. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, we have Molly Bloom on the podcast. If you're not familiar with the name right away, she is the storyline for the movie Molly's Game. And actually, we just started in a casual conversation about scoliosis back surgery, and then we started talking, and so we'll just roll the tapes here and get right into it. But Molly, ladies and gentlemen, Molly was an Olympic class skier, had an accident, then went to law school, then ran the most exclusive high stakes poker game pretty much in the world, almost ish. And then became an FBI target. And there's a movie called Molly's Game. And I'll say this, well, I've seen the movie like 4 times. And I remember when it first came out, obviously I didn't know you at that time, hadn't met you. And I'm like, this woman is a baller. Like, holy shit. Because I'm a fan of business, and I don't care what the business is, but I'm a super fan of business. It is given me every joy and everything I have in life in terms, and I don't mean monetarily. I mean my identity and my wife and my, it's just it's been just a thread in everything that I do. And so when I saw the movie, I was just like, wow, that is such an incredible story. And so if anybody hasn't seen the movie, you have got to see Molly's Game. It is really, actually, it's kind of like one of my favorite movies, to be honest. I love the storyline. So, and I like poker and I like business. And so
I share your love of business. And I would have never predicted that would bring so much passion to my life. But I do want to fact correct you on something. You made me sound just a little more accomplished than I am, which I'm generally okay with, but I also am kind of committed to honesty these days. So I did not go to law school. What happened was I had the scoliosis. It was so severe that I had to have this really intense operation where they fused together the top 11 vertebrae in my back. First, they tried to straighten my spinal cord, which, as you can imagine, is a fragile procedure. And then in order to keep it from curving, they fused the top 11 vertebrae together and then put 2 metal rods on the side. And, everybody under the sun in varying severity of tones said, mogul skiing is not going to happen for you. But I was young and I just didn't want to listen. I didn't respect most authority unless I thought it made sense. And so then I went out and I actually made the US ski team and made it to the Olympic qualifiers. And that's when I fell. And I had taken, it was in my last year of college at the University of Colorado, and I had taken the LSATs and I'd done well, but in the movie, Aaron Sorkin really inflated my LSAT score. So I think that's what stuck with everyone. But I did well, and I was hoping to go to law school next. kind of because my dad said one day when I asked, what should I do? Because my brother's paths were so defined. And he said, well, you like to argue a lot and you like to read. So I think you should be a lawyer. So it was kind of like, no thought process, just that's what I'm going to do. And but before heading to law school, I was so lost because skiing and this endeavor and the sacrifice was such a huge part of my identity. And I just ran a little bit. I wanted to get away from, sitting in those rooms at the University of Colorado looking at the mountains and watching my teammates leave for the second semester. And so I ended up going to LA because of the weather. Seriously. I was just like, I've been chasing winter my whole life. I just want to go somewhere and be warm. And I really didn't know much about LA. So I just wanted to fact correct that I did not end up going to law school. I wish I did. And that my LSAT score was a little bit lower than it was in the movie.
Well, so first of all, I thank you for that. But I think, you could have said like, oh, I'm trying to be honest more nowadays. But I think like, it's interesting, your honesty and integrity, like in the storyline of the movie, at least, but hearing you speak, it's like, it was so important for you to protect the identities of people who were in your game. And so it was beautiful to see like that being a common thread in, who you are as a person. So I'm not surprised by the correction. So thank you. But so it's interesting. You brought up identity there. And I mean, we'll get into the movie. I'm like, of course we will, and your story and all that kind of stuff. But identity to me is like one of the most important things. The most powerful force in the human psyche is to remain congruent with how we identify ourselves. And so you use the word identity, which you don't hear a lot of people just kind of spit that out. But how much was the identity like? Were you at that time when you were going to California? Were you running away and looking for a changed identity, or what was, because you said you were lost? And I think that resonates with a lot of listeners too, as they transition different things.
I had never thought outside this box of, I'm a very serious student and I am going to go to the Olympics and I'm an athlete. I had a pretty atypical college years. I didn't drink on my 21st birthday. I was studying a lot of weekends. And then I would take second semester off to go train with the team. And then even during the summer, we would find a glacier somewhere. Whistler was where we found the glacier, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. But and then I would do a really quick Maymester. So, and my brother was, a prodigy in this sport, and my dad loved mogul skiing, and it was just through every thread of my childhood, seemed to be woven through this. And so I think the decision to go to LA was just to take a breather. And I think inside I knew that I needed to change. I needed to see that the world wasn't as small as the world that I was living in. And I had been putting a lot of pressure on myself for a really long time. And so I think I just needed a breather. And I had no idea what to expect in LA. I thought I would go be warm for a year, maybe get an internship at a law firm or something, and then go back with, some of the grief and sadness behind me, and also to expose myself to see that mogul skiing is a small little world, and it's fantastic and it's amazing, but there's a big world out there. And I think I needed to see that in order to deal with this identity crisis and this broken heart. Now, if I could go back in time and tell myself at 21, if you're looking to find yourself, maybe not LA, maybe the worst place to go. I don't know, like 50-50 with Vegas. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's funny. But you sure did get exposed to a different world.
Whew, I sure did.
Okay, so just before we leave the identity piece, because you talked about like this sadness and this it sounded to me like a loss of what you held on to for so long. Did that whole process leave you vulnerable to something, or open to something, or what was that like? I'm really interested in like what happened during that time, so that like people can learn from that lesson, and even grow from that lesson.
If you're asking how I went from a straight A student and elite athlete to running an underground crime syndicate, yeah, there's there's some causes and conditions there. And I've thought about that a lot. And I think what happened, a couple things. First of all, I had a very overpowering father who I adore. We had a tough relationship, but he really ran the family like, I'm the boss. Everybody has to listen to what I say. And to me, I said, in my mind, I was like, if the rules are consistent and they're just, I'm down. If it's always moving at your whim, not down.
Right.
So, justice has always been a thing for me. Courage has always been a thing for me. And so, and then when I went to LA, I had this very sort of same personality boss. And I think I was tired of it. And the other thing is I had left it all on the field. I had, sacrificed, gave up my whole life, learned how to ski at an elite level with an immovable thoracic spine, learned how to play hurt, showed up early, worked harder than most. And at the Olympic qualifiers, I skied over this little piece of pine bough, which means I literally tripped on a stick, and so all of that was so hard to process. And so much of this was an attempt to have a seat at the table that my brothers had, because really early on, I had an athletic prodigy brother, Jeremy, who was number one in the world at 16, two-time Olympian, three-time world champion in mogul skiing. Went on to the NFL Combine, got drafted 5th round to the Philadelphia Eagles. So, his athletic career in a small town football and skiing was like, it was larger than life, and it was something that my dad really valued. And then my other brother, was beating my dad in chess at like 5, and he ended up being a Harvard educated cardiothoracic surgeon. And I did not have these well-defined super talents. And so, yeah, I think it was a rebellion. And I think it was also an opportunity that seemed far from convention and seemed like I could mold it into something that I wanted, as opposed to, sort of being held down by certain personalities, and we can get more into that. But I think it's an astute question. And I think the long-winded answer is yes, I was vulnerable for a different reality, and I was pissed off.
So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your honesty, and obviously you have a great relationship with your father.
We do now.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that. And so as the question that kind of popped in my head as you were talking about that was, obviously I'm not a female. So as a female, what was the feeling like for you in that family dynamic of like, was it, I'm always competing, or I'm not enough, or I'm like, what, on both ends of that, where did you fall inside that spectrum of?
Yeah, I felt that I was never enough. And I also felt that girls got treated differently. Now, here's to be fair, because I think it's really important to look at your own part in things. I learned that a little later in life. I was a pain in the ass, you know? I challenged my dad, I challenged his authority, I argued, and my brothers were pretty amicable. They were pretty just go with the flow kind of guy. So I get it. And I get it even more now because I have a daughter who is a little me. And I'm like, I understand to some degree.
Yeah.
But I always thought, because at 16, you're not so self-aware, right? I always thought my dad likes boys better, and my dad likes these boys better because they're better at stuff than I am. I didn't really reflect and ask myself, well, are you making it a little challenging to like you? And I felt justified in what I was fighting for, but I was, the interviews in the movie where the little girl is like, what do you think about society? It's a joke.
Mhm.
At 12 years old, those are actual interviews. My dad would do these interviews with us every year on our birthday. And so,
Were those the real ones from? Oh,
well,
wow.
it was a reenactment.
A reenactment.
But
Okay.
verbatim script. So, I was just fired up and I was ready to fight anyone and anything that I felt was unfair, unjust. But at the same time, it's so complicated, relationships with parents. I wanted him to love me and be proud of me more than anything in the world.
Two things here. One is like, one of the things that I've learned is like, if I get an argument with my wife, which doesn't happen often anymore, but when we do, and she says, just leave me alone, she doesn't actually want me to leave her alone. She wants me to come and love her and hold her and reassure how much I love her, no matter how she shows up.
And that's hard, right?
And it's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, but you have to put yourself aside and think about, how do I meet the need of this person in front of me right now? So I guess my question for you then is as a parent now today, and your daughter's, is it 2? 3, sorry. And so, you've got a 3-year-old daughter now. You're going to be a parent. What's been the lessons? Like, what are the takeaways? Because I think we have a lot of young listeners actually. And I think you're an amazing role model for any woman. If you are a woman, you need to see this movie. Like, it's not a recommendation, it's a must. Because I really truly think that you are such a role model. Because of the courage that you had and the things that you did and the risk you took and all that stuff. And we're going to get into all that. But when you're looking back now as your older self, and what were the lessons, and then what would be maybe the wisdom that you might impart on a young girl and the parents of a young girl, especially a father?
Yeah, I love this question and it's very important. So I'm going to try to be as thoughtful as I can about it. Let's start with the parents. I have the opportunity to cherry pick the incredible, extraordinary things that my parents did and to eliminate the mistakes. And we've talked about it. They've been candid. They were 30 years old. They were doing their best, And so with my dad, I'm forever grateful that he pushed me. I am forever grateful that he insisted that we learned how to walk through fear, that we learned how to manage discomfort in terms of risk and discipline. These were non-negotiables in my family. Like, some kids get grounded for missing curfew. We would get grounded for, not trying.
As he saw it.
As he saw it.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Just want to frame that.
Yeah. I mean, he would say it's okay if you fail, but you can't not try, But I think in my family, and especially from my father, there was a lot of love was conflated with success. So in order to get the love, and now I can say it, my dad always loved me. In order to get the admiration and the positive reinforcement, which felt like the sun was shining on you, you needed to be a winner. And any behavior that seemed counter to that, was met with an Arctic winter, if I may.
Right.
And so with my daughter, it's, I'm going to push her. I'm going to require her, if she starts something, to at least finish it. Unless, something comes up that, it's really unhealthy or whatever. I want her to learn how to, as my dad says, suffer constructively, meaning be able to be uncomfortable for prolonged periods of time and focus in order to do well in school or do well in sports or do well in arts or whatever she chooses. I've already started to teach her tools on how to overcome fear. And I've already started to plant the seeds, because I think this is so important, especially with girls, to overcome that voice in the head that will come someday. Right now, she's free. But around 13, 14, that's going to change. And I want to make sure that she has those tools to understand that a lot of what is in her mind, her thoughts, is complete fiction. And a lot of what the messaging from society is also complete fiction. So I want to give her the tools to be able to observe that and challenge that and choose a different way and not get sucked into that. But at the end of the day, I want her to never question my love. I want her to know that it's unconditional. I mean, everyone says like, oh, this is not the way to, build resilient kids. If you listen to Kobe Bryant, his parents, his dad came to his first, he started playing basketball. For an entire season, he didn't score one time. And he said, Dad, I'm so sorry. You keep coming to these games and I'm not scoring. And his dad said, I don't care if you ever score or if you ever make a basket. Like, I just love you and I'm here to support you. And so there's so much science and so much data that says if you want to build resilient kids, make sure they have a safe, loving, unconditional place at home. So then they can go out into the world and take those risks. They can go out into the world and they know they have this safe harbor to come home to. I didn't feel like I had that. I felt like in my home and outside of my home, I had to be a winner no matter what. And that was how I got love. And that was how I got praise. And that was how I felt a part of my family. My mom, on the other hand, she taught us beautiful things that are as big a part of our success as my dad's. She taught us that to be of service in the world, to stop thinking about ourselves so much, to think about integrity and to think about our values. And at night, when she would lay in bed with us, she would talk about, what did you do well today? What are you proud of? And what could you do a little better? And, just having that sort of awareness and kindness. I mean, forever, she wouldn't even say she was mad at us. She thought that word was too aggressive. She would say she was cross. And so, I get to cherry pick these things that they did well and the things that they didn't do well. And for young girls, for young boys, I think the most important thing that you can do is to start to figure out who you are separate from the world, from the external. And because if you allow yourself to be defined and if you derive your value entirely or even predominantly from your social friends, from social media, from whether or not you win the game or whether or not you get an A, I know this for sure. It will never be enough. It is the Sisyphean task. You will push that rock up the hill, you'll get to the top of the hill, and you realize that it rolls right back down. And so, I came into this later in life when my life was destroyed, and it changed everything. It's not easy, but it's doable. And I think one of the first places to start is through meditation. And we can talk about that more as that came into my life. But meditation will allow you to listen to that voice in your head and see that it's just kind of part of this operating system. It's not you, it's not telling you the truth. It's called the default mode network, and it's composed of, sort of ancient survival like techniques, which is essentially be afraid of everything and don't think you're good enough and make sure you conform with everyone, because if you don't in a tribal society and you're out on your own, that's equated with death. So starting to really be able to sit in observance of feelings and emotions and decide which ones you want to get involved with and be able to constantly work on that reframe.
Yeah, I love that. It's like our 2 million-year-old brain is always telling us like everything is something that could either kill you or it's going to cause you damage or your family or whatever. And so we're always in that survival mode. And what else? So I'd love to get back to meditation, but I also am curious, like, are there some other pieces that you did, because your life literally collapsed and so I can see as you're explaining this, and when you guys go watch the movie, you're going to reflect back on this conversation and go, oh my God, yeah, like I can see how this. So what other, beyond meditation, what else did you do? And what else would you recommend to a young girl who feels that they're in that spot? Because you don't have to have your life literally collapsed, but you don't have, that doesn't actually have to happen in order for you to believe that your life is collapsing. And so there's.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think, first of all, if a couple things, I think we need to get better at taking risks. And the reason that I believe that is because risk is how you move forward. And risk is how you start to understand that this can be your world too, and that you can do the things that you want to do, even if it seems like the odds are stacked against you, even if it seems so far away. And the way to get comfortable with risk is to start taking risks. And this is kind of like my little mantra with risks: 20 seconds of courage. So say you're so nervous, you want to ask for a promotion or a raise, or you want to, leave your company. All it takes is to write a rough draft of that email, maybe have ChatGPT edit it, and then 20 seconds of courage is all it takes to send it, and then you're in the game. And the more that you get comfortable, or at least tolerant of taking risks, the bigger your life becomes. And the less you feel sort of constrained by your own fear, by, the sort of scariness of what if someone says no, or what if they stop liking me? And all of that stuff is way scarier and way bigger of a deal in anticipation, in thought process, than it is in real life. My biggest fear was failing spectacularly in front of the world. And then I built this huge business. I had a ton of respect, a ton of power, a ton of people who wanted to see me fail. And I failed spectacularly in front of the world. And there was this moment after everything settled of like, wow, I'm kind of free, because nobody is expecting me to come back from this, and nobody is expecting me to do anything, that I'm written off. And so that was this incredible moment of like, okay, now my life is my own, the journey is my own. And so I don't recommend blowing your life up like I did. But I do recommend starting to take those contrary actions. So if you're someone who's a people pleaser and who says yes all the time and finds yourself sort of swamped with all these like things that you're doing for other people, start to say no. And in the beginning, it's a little no, and you could excuse it or whatever, but the only way to change is to change the behavior, is to take the contrary action. If you're really afraid of something, you know, if it's not illegal and not immoral and not dangerous, do it. This life is for you to experiment with, and almost nothing is unrecoverable. Look, I went out, I got indicted for running a criminal gambling underground enterprise, and now I get hired to speak about integrity. When you take these small actions and you face your fears head on, and you start to build this formidable inner core, you discipline your mind and you learn how to manage your emotions, you're the architect, you're the driver. Whereas if you let those things keep you on the bench, life will pass you by.
It's a great message. And to circle back on the, especially for women, young women, especially, who feel like they can't say no, you just drawing that back to your philosophy of 20 seconds of courage. I mean, it's just 20 seconds to say no, and give yourself the gift of that ability, and that control that you feel you don't have. I find it like it's almost comical, where you're like, your biggest fear is to fail miserably in public, and like, you did a pretty good job at it. Like,
yeah, I really did.
It was awesome. But I mean, at what level of freedom did that give you?
Well,
I mean, maybe not in the moment, obviously, but
to what it did, and there's a multifactorial event. I mean, so maybe just for someone who hasn't seen the movie, I'll back up a little bit. So when I moved to LA, I started working for an attorney who had a restaurant and who had just raised a fund for real estate. And it was definitely a whole new experience. It was a whirlwind. And he came into the office one day and he said, I need you to serve drinks at my poker game tomorrow night. And I didn't know anything about poker, and I was, in my early 20s, and I went home and Googled things like, what kind of music do poker players like to listen to and what do they eat? Trying to like learn as much as I could. And I made this super embarrassing playlist with songs like The Gambler on it. Just Google like,
I've actually never heard that song in a poker room before.
Oh yeah, well, it's about as embarrassing as it gets.
Pretty funny, actually.
And then I got a cheese plate and showed up, and all of a sudden I find myself in this room. These players kept walking in, and it was, now, disclaimer, the names that I mention are people who have already talked about playing in these games. The people that haven't, I just kind of feel like that's their own story to tell, but I can tell you like about them. So, in that room, in the first couple nights, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, Tobey Maguire, the head of one of the biggest investment banks in the world, the head of one of the biggest movie studios, somebody prolific from the tech world, a famous athlete, a politician who's a household name. And here I was just kind of standing in my like very Colorado dress with my cheese plate from Gelson's and my, mix CD, because that was what we did with it, with
Right.
songs like The Game Runner. So I couldn't just stop the playlist from happening like on my phone. It was just like that CD was in and that's it was going to play.
Right. You're not
You know?
pushing skip on Spotify here, right? Yeah.
And so, you know, that night I was just kind of like, my eyes were open, and what really, after I got over the embarrassment and the sort of insecurity of, you know, being in that room with those people, I started to listen. And I sat in the corner, and I was basically serving drinks. And these people were speaking about their lives, their businesses, future trends, stories, and on how they, in such a candid way. And I'm just sitting there like taking notes on my laptop, like not in any way because I wanted to, I thought I would ever write a story, but just like, okay, so-and-so invested in this, like, you know, I was just, it was such an incredible room to get to be a part of. And, you know, I really, really, really wanted to be invited back. And I remember my mom said, after I got home, you know, because I'd made like $3,000 for refilling Diet Cokes, and I was, you know, struggling, and that was more than I made in a month. And it was all, you know, it was in cash, and I'm like driving home, just sure someone's following me. Cut to like a couple of years later, I'd have like, you know, $2 million in a suitcase and just be like super casual about it. But at that time, and I came home and I woke my mom up and I told her about this experience that I had and all the things that I hoped to gain from it and from these people. But I had this sinking sensation because I had seen this world and I'd seen this table, and how was I ever going to be a part of that? And she simplified it for me. She said, you know, maybe instead of thinking about all the things you can get from these people, you could think about what you could give. And I kind of rolled my eyes and I'm like, Mom, what do I have to give to these people? And she quoted Maya Angelou. She said, people are going to forget what you said and what you did. They're not going to forget the way you made them feel. And this is such an overlooked aphorism. Like, people make almost all their decisions with their emotions. And so, you know, I started to think about, well, what makes people feel good, safe, and I started to learn about listening, because most people listen to respond, or, you know, these days are on their phone, and that is a really big hit to the fragile psyche, you know, for real. And so I started to ask questions, open-ended questions, and it's called listening to discover. And then you get to go down roads with people and learn about their origin stories and, you know, connect dots with them. And that's a really strong bonding experience. And then, you know, I would sit at each game and I would take notes. I would notice the times where people were frustrated with the process and how could I improve on that. And, you know, there was a lot of bad behavior, because when somebody loses money, even if they're a billionaire, it can translate into this just terrible behavior. But the more that I sat around and watched it, the more that I realized, going back to that, you know, lizard brain, even if someone has a lot of money, losing money triggers this fear in someone. And that was what was under it. And so starting to learn how to recognize that and then know how to diffuse that, because what I saw from most of the other game runners is one person would say, F you, I lost, you know, $300,000. You should have cut me off. I'm not paying you. Game runner would say, you know, aggressively, you are paying me, you know, threat. And then games would blow up. But if instead I tried to understand where it was coming from and it was fear, then it was like, okay, my job is to diffuse that fear and to say, listen, you had a bad night, but here's my spreadsheet on everybody and you're a winner overall. Or, you know, you're look at how much you've improved. You're going to come back and win that in spades. but go home, take as much time as you need, be with your family. I'll be here. It's okay. And then immediately what you have is you have someone who believes that you are on their side. And I was. And, just these simple things, these simple ways of showing up for people and doing favors without being asked to do favors, and noticing when someone likes a certain type of water or something, and just having that there for them, and making sure that you have really good food for people when they walk in, because maybe they're starving because they've been working all day, and just looking at all the details and trying to create this environment where people feel really seen, secure, and also, then I got into like the sort of next level, which is the human brain loves novelty. Like, how can I find some novelty to bring in? What I found is that there was kind of this hierarchy in the games, and this was after I started running my own games, of kind of like billionaires at the bottom, celebrities, and then professional athletes. And when a really celebrated professional athlete would walk into the room, it was like being at a Taylor Swift concert. It's just this, athletes I think are the modern day gladiators, and it affects them. And I would watch them fold top hands to some, like to A-Rod when he played, and I was like, okay, so this is this is like top level novelty.
Right.
And so, just starting to understand how human beings work, and then training yourself to authentically, it can't be fake, to authentically start to be curious and empathetic and concerned, and to notice the good parts of people, and to be able to manage yourself when somebody's behaving badly. And of course there's limits. I don't advise that anybody be a doormat, but when it's just two egos, then to me, that's not sophisticated diplomacy. That's not a sophisticated way to be client facing. And so I just started to learn all these little lessons that were so critically important, and truly one of the really most salient through lines into why, when I went into each chapter of my life as like a major underdog, why I think I was able to make up that distance.
And what do you think that what do you think that exact component was?
Well, actually, I'm writing a book about it because I think it's so important, and it's called Effective Presence with an A. And it's literally the science of how you make people feel. And a lot of the science that's out there on EQ, I think the discovery of EQ was one of the most important of this century, and it's going to become even more important as AI, becomes more common, because emotional quotient, how you deal with other people, how socially aware you are, how well you're able to navigate different personalities, is so critically important, and how well you're able to make somebody feel like they matter, and can trust you, is just very, very important. And then to also start to cultivate interesting things about yourself, so that you have things to talk about, so that you're not just, sort of like in the echo chamber, like just saying the same things everybody else says. And so effective presence posits that it's a consistent part of your personality, that everyone leaves this emotional footprint on the world. And some people's is positive, some people's is negative, and some people's is neutral. And unlike a lot of the instruction around EQ, which is to learn how your mind works and then learn how to read someone else's mind by their facial expressions or body language, I knew after running 8 years of poker games that that reading someone's face is not the most effective way. And I looked, I wanted to find the science to back it up. And I read this book, and met this brilliant female scientist who also doubted that. And so there was such discussion and argument within the science community that they put together, a group of scientists that sort of were on both sides of the idea to do a really big study on meta-analysis. So to look at all the evidence and data we have. And what they found out after they conducted this unanimously is that if you rely on reading people's faces to navigate, to try to understand their interior world and to navigate that situation, your error rate is going to be about 60%.
Wow.
Now, it changes if you know the person, because the brain is a pattern recognizer. And it changes if you just happen to be one of these very, very, very few people who are really good at it. But a much better way is to start to understand universally how to be likable, how humans behave in social situations, what creates aversion, what creates likability, and then to start to change those things in yourself. I mean, so many times we'll walk into a meeting or an interview, and what are you thinking about? Do I have the right clothes? Do I have the right talking points? Is this person, like, am I going to come across good? We're not thinking at all, how am I going to make this person feel? What can I do to make them feel seen, heard, remembered? And there's this interesting, very funny, but also just this testament to, like, it's back to basics. So the Guinness Book of World Records has a category for the most successful salesman. And the most successful salesman is a car salesman. I can't remember his name right now because I've been potty training my daughter and haven't had sleep for the last 3 nights. But anyway, he's a car salesman, and he sells, like, per day, like, some crazy amount of cars. And then he has these return customers. And so they interviewed him and they said, what's your strategy? And he said, I tell people that I like them. And then after I sell them a car, I send them notes on each holiday and say, hey, Dwayne, I really like you. And he's like, that's basically it. And if you think about it, people really like people that like them. If you feel like, it's true. If you feel like, when I'm talking to Heather, I feel like she really respects me and admires me. But when I'm talking to Molly, she's on her phone all the time, and it feels like she thinks I'm not important. Like, even if Molly has a better deal to sell, you might go with Heather, right, if it's neck and neck. And so I think this becomes incredibly important, and effective presence has all kinds of tips and tricks in communication, and it's pretty learnable. Whereas, I remember when the whole EQ movement, and they were trying to teach, like, very scientific, engineer-minded people to read other people socially. And listen, I'm really good at reading other people. I make mistakes all the time. It's just, there's some people that when they get mad, their face turns red, that, it's obvious. There's other people that just sit back, smile, and plan your demise. You know what I mean? There's all different kinds of, and then it was so solidified when I started public speaking, because when you look out on that crowd, you have no idea, for the most part, what they're thinking. Like, the first 10 times I spoke, I was like, they hate me. But then it would be like, people would stay after, thank you so much. I'm going through so much. That inspired me. So stop trying to read people's faces. Stop trying to read people's body language and learn how you as a person can leave this positive emotional footprint. It's so much more effective. And but it needs to be true, you know?
I like it. I love it because it's very true. When you're looking at somebody's face and you see an expression, we make assumptions that they're thinking about us. Like, for example, if you're a public speaker, I used to own a speakers bureau, and I didn't really speak much. I didn't like it. It wasn't something I really enjoyed. But we would work with speakers, and a lot of times when you are taking somebody through an emotional journey in your conversation or in your speech, they are going through their journey. You're talking about your journey, but they're relating their life or their life's journey to your journey. And that's the whole point of having a speaker come in. But then as they're doing it, like, you could see not a scowl on their face, but a look that you might go, oh my God, they don't like what I'm saying. But it's not actually not at all that. They're actually super connected to what you're saying. And it makes them, think back to a time where they failed or they did something wrong or whatever. And so I think it's a very, very good point, especially in business, because, it's a business podcast, but it's really also a life podcast. But I think you've I've written so many notes. It's like I feel like I just witnessed a master class, first of all, in customer service. And you see this in the movie, and I'm glad you brought it up, because, and I actually want to go back to the very beginning of this conversation, if you don't mind, because I have a couple of questions, but I honestly, I think you delivered a masterclass on customer service. And this, did you even know at the time, like you had mentioned, like, oh, I'm sitting in there and they're talking and I'm writing down, like, this person says this and this person says that. And did you know that you were, like, because ultimately, especially when you're dealing with the affluent, is like, everybody likes to be seen. Everybody likes to be understood.
No question.
It's like, I say this, I share this a lot, but like when I'm traveling, on planes, like, airports can be the worst places in the world because people are behind, they're late, they're pissed off, they're this, they're that. And I make a special point to make sure, like, when I'm boarding the plane, like, thank you, hi, I'm like over the top, like, thank you. I put my hand on their shoulder. I really appreciate what you're doing here. Like, and I'll do it in many other situations, but because I know that, that is when either, people can be mad, they can be nervous, they can be preoccupied. They're thinking about a meeting they're going to, or where they're are they going to be on time? And so they are not present. And so they never connect at the level that you're talking about through this, presence kind of piece. And I didn't know you were writing I think I knew you wrote when we met that one time. I think you had talked about you writing a book, but I didn't know it was actually on effective presence. But if we could go to the very beginning, I do have one question, because I think it's important, especially for people who have a business, is that, you're in a room, and I don't want to make assumptions, but I'm the hallucination that I was making as you were talking about it was that, like, you come from Colorado, you're in your Colorado dress, you kind of queued it all up. And then you're like, holy shit, look at these, like these are people I see on TV. These are wealthy people. These are whatever. And I mean, well, first of all, I think so many people put a preconceived notion that, wealth or success or fame or fortune or all those things are better than what they currently have, which is absolutely not true. I've met a lot of successful people, a lot of wealthy people. And sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't trade their life for a penny. But as you're in that room, and I'm really curious, I guess this goes back to what we earlier talked about. Sorry, I'm babbling on here. But we talked about identity earlier, and it's like, to me, the hallucination I'm making is like, at some point in time through this whole process, there's an identity shift for Molly. And you know, I can't help but think you're like, oh my God, I've done all this stuff. I get the cheese platter. This sucks. What am I doing here? Why? Like, oh my God, where's the closest window I can jump out of type of thing, to where you get like, where does it start to change? Where do you start to feel comfortable? Where do you shift your identity, and how do you start to shift that identity?
So, great question that really no one has ever asked me. So in the beginning, when my bosses this is Molly, she made the playlist, she's gonna be, filling the drinks, tip Molly. Okay. And so in the beginning, there was a lot of focus on me, and I felt, insecure. But something that I learned from my ski career was how to feel scared, feel hurt, feel, insecure, and hold your head up anyway. It's a major fake it till you make it thing. And I've always had a lot of pride, in some places too much pride. And so I wasn't going to just be the, little like coward. I didn't want to dominate the room, but I wanted to hold my head up. And even though inside and my hands were shaking and everything. And so I got through that first all eyes, all famous, rich, like larger than life eyes are on me. And then the cards were dealt. And then that was the focus. And then I was able to, I'm an information junkie. Like, I love to learn. I could talk to anybody about their career or their life and find fascinations in it. Like, I just am very curious, and so this was kind of a dream come true for me, to just be a fly on the wall in one of these rooms, because they were all friends and peers. And so they're talking about these things that, I'd read about in my political science books or my economics books, or, in newspapers or whatever. But here were the people and the real stories. And it was endlessly fascinating to me. And then, as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, nobody at 23, 22 years, I can't remember how old I was early 20s, gets this opportunity to just build a network like this, like, or be in front of these people, or get to potentially be friends with these people. This is a massive opportunity. Because remember, I'm a little lost. I don't even know if I want to go to law school. I like to argue with my dad because I disagreed with him, and I do love to read, but I don't know if that's what I want to do. That's the soundbite I carried so that he would smile and approve. And so, here I am, sort of getting an MBA in tech, finance, Hollywood, athletic. Like, I'm just learning so much, and I'm hearing it's inside baseball, And so, as the night wore on, and then I realized these people operate differently, and they operate differently with chips. Because when people are giving you chips, it's not the same as money to them, right? It's different to hand someone a stack of $500 bills than it is to just shoot them a chip that says 500. And so at the end of the night, my major takeaways were the endless opportunities in getting, sort of like falling down this rabbit hole and getting direct contact with this network, and the endless opportunities of a chip economy in terms of profitability. And And then as the games continued, I sort of started to see a very different way to do it. And I started taking more initiative. So I built spreadsheets, to keep everyone's, because everyone up until that point, people just would be like, oh, I owe this, so I kept spreadsheets on everyone. And I didn't know a thing about Excel, but by my 31st birthday, my friends gave me an Excel spreadsheet birthday cake. Because that was like what they saw me doing most of all, is like just keeping numbers on people. And then, I had these creative ideas for how to because I didn't play poker and because I wasn't part of the Billionaire Boys Club, I was able to see it from a very different perspective. I was a voracious reader, and I have and had a really good imagination. So I was able to see that this was about so much more than poker. It was about mythology, the story around it. I mean, after the game, people would tell the stories all week, and that's, and then it was about fantasy and escapism and community. And so noticing those three things, locking down on those three things, I was able to slowly build out those silos and, immersive experiences where all of your senses are considered and thought about is the way. Like, I will walk into a restaurant now and I'll be like, how do this lighting, really? Like, these chairs, this position, because we really know so little about emotions, but what emotions are they are responses to sensory input. So, for instance, this is why people can differ so much. If you're a child of war and you hear a car backfire, your cortisol level rises. Like, your body's response to that sensory input, the emotion is the emotion, and the emotion is your body's best plan to deal with what input they just got. So the goal, we're talking about flow state, we're talking about, escapism. The goal is for all the senses to be in a place of homeostasis or excitement, right? And so all the details matter. I mean, Steve Wynn conducted a multi-million-dollar market research into what the most appealing scent is, and the scent that makes people feel the most hopeful and they want to be around the most. And so, it's in the details. And so as the games wore on, I would hear someone say, oh, I need a reservation at this restaurant. And I would just say, I can get that for you. Having no idea how to get that, but I got good at it. Or like someone saying, I just don't know what to get my wife for her birthday. And then coming the next day with some ideas and starting to solve problems I wasn't asked to solve, and starting to think about all the details in the room that, I could change, but I would change if it were mine. And, just because I didn't come from that world, it gave me an advantage. That's why I always think it's important to have people that have different life experiences, because they can bring so much creativity and see things in such a different light. When someone loves poker, they're myopic. And so most of the people that ran games and run games, they play in their own games. And so they're constantly thinking like, I had a bad week last night, so this week we're going to have pizza, whereas I could be so much more objective and say, like, I know player A loves Mr. Chow's, I know and just have it for them. And, basically before they even ask. And these little things sound like they're not a big deal. They're a big deal. And what I found with the billionaires, the people of influence, they even more so find it compelling when somebody actually listens to them, because most people look at them as transactions.
Yeah.
And there's such little trust. I mean, even today, like I see a little bit of it, someone reaches out and they're like, oh my gosh, like you're my hero, this, and then wait 15 seconds because here comes the ask.
Yeah.
Yep. And so to be the person who is just is not making the ask, who wants to get to know you for you, and and I was making the ask, right? But the ask was mutually beneficial. By the end of my sort of tenure in LA, I didn't have to court a single person. Like I had to turn people away.
Because people wanted it involved because you just added so much value.
Yeah. So basically when I started my own game, I moved it from this dingy basement. I invested to the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons. I upgraded my playlist.
No more cheese platters.
No more cheese platters. And if they were super fancy.
Yeah.
And hired a full staff of people. Before the game, I'd have everyone memorize everyone's favorite food order, drink order, the things they cared about. I said, unless it's immoral or illegal, the answer is never no. It's we'll figure it out. You want spring water from the Swiss Alps that has to be triple osmosis. Blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, we're going to figure that out for you. And, I hired people with effective presence. There's nothing I hate worse that makes me just like so angry when you ask somebody where you're spending a lot of money or whatever to do if you can do something and their just immediate answer is no. Like that to me, that communicates to me, I don't care about your experience. I can handle that now. Like
Yeah.
But I'm saying like from a business owner perspective, I never want someone to feel like that. I want someone to feel like they're the most important person in the room. I don't care if you are a car salesman or you are running the free world. Like, you can't, like, it's so, it shows who you are so quickly if you're only treating the like important people well. And so there's this thing that I think is important to do as a human being, as a business owner. And that is to have this inventory practice where you sit down and do some writing on who you want to be in the world. What are your values? How do you want to run your business? And then check in and make sure that who you say you are or who you want to be is lining up. And what you'll find is that it's very easy to overlook those things. It's not easy to be a person with integrity and who's honest and who, makes it not a zero-sum game, but like actually is willing to give up a little bit from your side to make someone else have a good experience. And so, I think like any other, if you never inventory your business, it's not going to do well. I think that's the same thing with character, with culture. And, the last thing I'll say is I think it all has to be authentic. I think we are in an age where people are just so tired of, the veiled intentions and what have you. And so I really do think that the critical piece here is that that's who you become. But so for instance, like sometimes there's people who are just repugnant, who are like, and so I don't want to sell myself out by, being like super nice to them or agreeing with them. But what I've found as a strategy for that is it's this thing called cognitive reappraisal. It's a fancy word for the reframe, but this is the perfect example. So, you're in the airport, right? Somebody just cuts in front of you in security and just, you have this opportunity to make a choice about this person. And what I always say to myself is, okay, I can either get pissed off here, I can ruin my day, I can have words, or I can think to myself, maybe this guy is in a hurry, he's about to miss his plane and his grandmother's dying. Mm-hmm. And then what happens is you elevate your mind, you give yourself peace, and then you allow yourself to still have empathy for a person who is, pissing you off. And of course there's boundaries, but that little trick has brought me so much peace, and it makes you feel better as a human being. Because there's easy empathy and there's hard empathy. Easy empathy is like, we both love the Broncos. They lost. We have empathy for each other.
Right.
Yeah. It's
common ground.
Right. It's it's the real, where the rubber really meets the road is like, can you sit and have a conversation and have an open mind with someone who you so disagree with their politics, their perspective on, like, I can sit and listen to someone who thinks that women should not have reproductive rights. I can listen to them. I can hear their side of it, and I don't need to get angry. I can sit and listen to someone who thinks the Holocaust never happened. I have family that was in the Holocaust. I want to hear them. And what you find so many times is that it's not bad versus good. It's experience, programming, socialization, and being able to do that really gives me such a better feeling about the world. And that's not to say you don't go and fight that fight if that's your fight. But the biggest problem we have is the fact that people can't listen to each other. If they disagree with each other on something. It's gotten to such a point of division and tribalism. It's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in the world that want to see things black and white because it provides them the certainty that they require to 100%. Navigate through the world. But it's not black and white. It's a world full of color. And what it's, just to add to your point, which is phenomenal. Like, I love the conversation, is, the question that, that I often ask myself. I'm a real believer in powerful questions. And so I kind of, chunk down questions that fit in certain situations, like the one you talked about in the airport. Somebody walks in front of you and it's like something, back in the day, I'd be like, what the fuck? but now I'm, now the question that my go-to question is, what else could this mean? And it just helps me and Byron Katie wrote a really amazing book called Loving What Is. Have you read that book?
I have not read that book, but I have read a lot. I've listened to a lot of podcasts and I'm a big fan.
Yeah. And so Byron Katie has these 4 questions. Well, it's 3, but is it true? And of course your answer is, yeah, it's true, because you're in a state. And then the second question is it really true? Like, would you stake your life on it that it's really true? Okay. Right. Well, maybe it's not 100% true. It's 90%. And then the last 2 questions, which I think are super powerful, is, who am I with this thought? And who would I be without this thought? And like, the book, for anybody listening, like, it is, this is a book that I probably have, I probably have 8-10 copies of this in my library that we just hand out to, staff or people who are struggling with these kind of blockages because I think it's so powerful. Okay, holy shit, Molly, you said so much there. Like, I try to go back and recap some of this for the listeners, but so I'm scrolling up in my iPad here as we're talking, but I'm curious. Like, one of the things that you said earlier was, when I asked you the question about being in the room with those people and where you came from, where you are, what was the shift in the identity, and one of the things that you related to right away was, in sport, I always had to feel like I had to put my head up. And even though my palms are sweating and I'm nervous and my knees are knocking or whatever the situation is, put my head up and just kind of, be in it. How important do you think your journey, competitive sports, has influenced it? And specifically where did it influence it? What was it for you? Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to that outstanding conversation with Molly Bloom. I mean, the story in itself is unbelievable. But what she accomplished in the nuances of how she built her business and the customer level of customer service and the EQ that she showed and, the reflection of her past lives on taking risk and, the 20 seconds of courage. It's just an amazing conversation. And so tune in next week because you don't want to miss that because we get deep into, actually what happened into her story of building her underground poker world empire that she basically built in LA and then onwards to New York. And it just gets more and more and more fascinating. So please tune in next week and listen to that conversation. We appreciate listening. We appreciate you sharing. And thank you so much for all of your support. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being with us. If you found value in the show and know a friend or coworker who could benefit from this conversation, please share the link via text or on social media. Remember, each share creates a ripple effect of knowledge and inspiration. And if this podcast has supported you in any way, please support us by clicking the follow or subscribe button. It helps us to improve the delivery of top quality content moving forward.
The views, information, or opinions expressed by guests during the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Dwayne Kerrigan and his affiliates. Dwayne Kerrigan or the Dwayne Kerrigan podcast is not responsible for and does not verify the accuracy of any of the information contained in the podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. Listeners are advised to consult with a qualified professional or specialist before making any decisions based on the content of this podcast.